Why are young people so miserable? This is a question that lots of people are asking, and the answers all seem to end up triangulating on one particular answer. But before we get to the answer, the question could be, well, maybe they're looking into their future and thinking, well, what am I actually moving into here? And this is something I covered on a premium hangout that we did on lotus.com called Megacity 1 is not an aspirational future. Because with the way this country is going, that's what it's going to end up like. And not just because we are going to house almost every person in the world on these islands, but we're also going to have the sort of overbearing managerial government and short police force, short on patience perhaps, should we say, that came with Megacity 1. I was really proud of this hangout. It was really good. So go and check that out if you'd like to subscribe to us and support us for the cost of a super chat a month. But also we are hiring. So again, thank you to everyone who has subscribed. We're looking for video content presenters and writers and a video editor. So do go to lotus.com/careers if you would like to read those job descriptions and get in contact and put yourself forward. But anyway, so let's begin. I find it ironic that Vice magazine, of all places, are like, young people are unhappier than ever. Coming from Vice magazine. Vice. As in, they're not living a virtuous life. And Vice magazine, like, I don't know why all of these wayward young people are so miserable. One of the accusations they make is that COVID and the COVID lockdowns are responsible for this. Now, they are undoubtedly, I think, a contributing factor to this, but this did not begin with COVID. This has been going on for quite some time. But just as they say, this is an article about young people in Britain in particular, but happiness and confidence in 16 to 25-year-olds in the UK has nosedived to lows not seen in over a decade. And the Office of National Statistics Research shows that young people are significantly more likely to experience high levels of anxiety and loneliness since in the general population, even though the COVID restrictions have been lifted, and they are exploring why this might be. Now, they're very left-wing, and so they put it down to the economy, but we'll talk about that, why that might not be the case in a minute. This is also a problem in America, as National Review posted recently, or in 2020 this was. So again, before the COVID lockdowns, this was a problem. In America, between 1946 and 2006, the suicide rate quadrupled for males ages 15 to 24 and doubled for females in the same age. And since 1950, the suicide rate per 100,000 Americans is increased by like almost 50% there to from 11.4 to 14. So it's going up. And Reuters Health reported that suicidal thinking, severe depression, rates of self-injury among US college students has more than doubled over less than a decade, says one nationwide study, which is not exactly good news. And the study's co-author, Jean Twenge, a professor of psychology at San Diego State University, says it suggests that something is seriously wrong in the lives of young people. Now, I'm sorry I'm front-loading this quite a bit, but I just want to get all the statistics on the table because people would say, well, is this not a case of modernity and the Western world? And it's like, no, actually. It turns out that 1 in 5 young people worldwide is depressed. UNICEF published their State of the World's Children report in 2021 and found that a survey of 20,000 people from 21 countries, 19% of respondents struggled with depression. For example, more than 1 in 3 young people in Cameroon and Mali reported feeling regularly depressed, whereas 1 in 5 people in the UK and 1 in 10 in Ethiopia and Japan felt the same way. So this has been going on for a while. In 2018, The Atlantic published an article talking about this. So again, pointing out that this is happening before the COVID lockdowns happened, which is why this is important. And they called it the happiness recession, where just the number of people who say they're very happy in life just falls. And so now it's 1 in 4 people who says they're very happy, with obviously the curve getting worse as things go along. 22% of young men and 28% of young women reporting they're very happy. So this social trend has been going on inexorably. The COVID lockdowns, of course, have exacerbated it. But the question is why? Now, Nick, why might that be, do you think?
I've got 2 thoughts on this. The first thought is because of the internet and smartphones, the world now is a much smaller place. Mm-hmm. So if I lived in a village in the middle of Cameroon 30 years ago, all I would know would be that village. Yeah. And I would be probably a big fish in a small pond. And I would know everybody there. And I would know my status in that village and what that might project in my future. But today, you're looking on your phone, and that little lad in Cameroon is now looking at Singapore, London, America. He's looking at all other young people across the world who are mostly lying about how good their lives are, by the way. And he's looking at his life going, I'm fed up. My life is absolutely awful compared to all these people who live everywhere else. And it's not true.
All of these Instagram influencers who spend like 6 hours crafting the perfect shot and then go back to their depression.
Absolutely. And the second point is we always seem to forget that we're social creatures, and living on your phone and living on the internet is like saccharin instead of sugar. It feels the same at the time, but just like saccharin, it's damaging your body because what we need is face-to-face contact. We need people who will touch your shoulder while they're talking to you, or give you, your friend giving you a little punch on the arm. All those things when you're with people, that's what makes us happy. It's having friends. It's having that community around you. And we call the internet now, different communities. I'm with the painting little ship community. It's not really a community. There's all strangers who just share one hobby. We need to get together, and we need to get people and kids off their phones, socialising. And socialising and making friends is difficult. And what we do is we give them a choice. You can make real friends, which is difficult, or you can have invisible, made-up friends on your phone. So children pick the easy option, like children nearly always do.
And I think that you've really summarised and struck the point precisely there as well. It is the genuine social, the bonds that you get in people's presence that you just can't get over the internet. You just can't form these kind of reliable friendships. And you miss out on so much of human interaction that is non-verbal over the internet. The way someone looks at you, the way they laugh in response to your jokes. Like, you tell a joke, and a lot of people might hit the the laugh emoji or something, but it's not the same as seeing the joy in someone's face. And you can't. And again, there are so many small things. Like if you start someone laughing with a joke, you can often make it intensify it by telling further jokes on the same topic and reduce them to absolute fits of laughter. And that's a very pleasurable thing to do. Everyone enjoys it, and you can't do these sorts of things. You don't get the sort of memorable interactions on the internet that you get.
Let me go dark just for a moment. Matt Chafferty's uncovered quite a lot of child sexual abuse.
Right.
And when we're talking to the individual girls who have been abused, we've come across one boy, but it's nearly always girls. And what we've learned from the girls about how they got themselves in that situation was because we've had one or two say to us, all I really wanted was a hug.
That's really awful.
And to get that hug, they're willing to be abused because we're social creatures. And having that man, that stranger who doesn't care for you, put his arms around you and for those couple of seconds treat you like a princess was enough for those girls to say, well, you can do whatever you want now to a certain extent because we're social creatures.
Yeah, it's ironic that we call it social media, given how it is driving us to antisocial behaviours, where we don't spend time with friends and family, and we feel that it is easier to not do that, and it's we think that just messaging a DM is enough to count as social interaction now. It's like, no, that's not enough. You need to spend an hour in each other's company to gain some sort of genuine benefit from it. And like you say, like the fact that children are on this, I'm currently in a bit of a war with my own wife over whether our kids will have mobile phones. I'm totally against it. I'm totally against it. And honestly, if the government came out tomorrow and said, right, we're going to make it illegal for anyone under 25 to have a mobile phone, I'd be like, well, that's good for them. I mean, don't get me wrong, it would be tyrannical from a liberal perspective, but it would be better for mental health.
It needs monitoring and controlling by the parents. It shouldn't. I don't think it should be have the phone 24 hours a day or never have a phone. It's up to that parent to work out that balance, and it should be a balance.
I'm on the never have a phone train, but that's because I've had to deal with my kids and having phones. but no, you are right. And the worst thing is, and I've seen it in my own daughter, where if she's allowed to be on her phone, she'll spend all day in her room on her phone, and she'll end up after a few days just being miserable and depressed. Whereas when she's naughty and we take the phone away as a punishment, her mood just brightens for the next week or so. It's like, right, okay, this is very clearly
Addictive.
Yeah, exactly. It's addictive and it's not good for them. But of course, you get people who are left-wingers who will say, well, no, it's because young people don't have enough money or opportunities and things like this. Well, that's exactly right. If you can go to the next one, John. In 2010, The Guardian, when they were able to report on such things honestly, would post articles like this showing that, well, hang on a second, children don't actually self-report unhappiness when they're poor. And this is something I've tried to explain to people before. It's like, because my family is not a family that comes from any money or anything, like Wiltshire farmers and Welsh miners. And so my family came from an incredibly poor background, but they weren't unhappy because they had each other. And that's what these children report in this study. They did a study of 32,000 young people and found that the children living in poverty were just as happy as those who came from wealthy families. And when asked, the research shows the children are more likely to say if they're happy if they're able to talk to their parents about their problems. It's the relationship that matters. That's what makes you happy.
Same with adults. Children are the same as adults. What we need to be happy is we need structure, we need boundaries, we need rules. We need to be able to know the sphere we're operating in, because then we don't have to worry about certain things. When there's no boundaries and no rules, anything goes. And when anything goes, that's a tremendous amount of decisions you're making every single second, and it can wear you out. But when you have children and they know the boundaries, they feel safe within that context. And that's same with adults. That's why we have laws of the land.
Yeah. And it's also stability and reliability. I think predictability is good for kids, because when you've got no boundaries, everything's uncertain and you actually don't know what's going to happen next. And so you're left in this particularly insecure world. Whereas if I get home at 3 o'clock, I do my homework until 4 o'clock, then we have dinner, and then I sit with my dad for an hour or something like that, which is basically my evenings. But it's you can rely on that. You come to expect it. You know what's going to happen, and so you feel that you have some sort of agency of your own surroundings because there's predictability about them. But if you don't know what's going to happen, you don't know if there's going to be a strange man, at home that night or something like this. It's terrifying.
You need to be able to predict what other people are going to do.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, our natural reaction is go to violence straight away to protect yourself.
Yeah.
So a child needs to know, my mum and dad's going to treat me nice. I've got safety at school. My friends will do these things. But when you have no idea what that person's going to do in front of you, you're on edge all the time.
Well, you've got to be as well. You don't have a choice, and it's a cruel thing to put children through, I think. But anyway, so as lots of studies have been showing, yes, it appears that it is social media that is not good for children. Like they say in this report on the Washington Free Beacon, up to 20% of teenagers have depression. We go to the next one, John. And it appears to be the consequence of social media, because this is at the root of everything, because it determines how we choose to interact with one another. So it isn't merely just looking at the screen. It's the fact that screen time is now destroying the personal relationships you would have had. Like I'm sure the same when you were a kid, you'd have to go out and knock for your friends.
Yes.
So you'd have to go physically knock on the door. Is Jim there? Does he want to come out? No, he can't. He's been grounded today. Oh, okay, I'll go see Bob, And, you had an actual thing you had to do rather than just click, 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 click. It's physical. And again, this was exercise. You had to walk from place to place. You can see how much more wholesome it was, obviously. But this in America, obviously, is the same problem that we're having here. Pew polling did an analysis of a survey that shows that the average teenager apparently spends 16 minutes less per day socializing than 10 years ago. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but that adds up. Over the course of a year, that's entire days they don't spend socializing. And it's quite terrible. The number of times that teenagers go out with their parents has slipped, falling by half a day on average, falling by half day to a day per week on average. So hardly ever now. Again, me and my parents used to do things all weekend. Every weekend we'd have something to do. And it's just terrible. And so you've got this problem. And so when the young people are asked, as in, what are you doing? Well, it turns out that they're not really doing any of the things that we would have done when we were young. For example, many young people haven't tried alcohol. Now, I'm not suggesting that teenagers should drink underage, obviously, but it is what teenagers try and do. When I was young, and I was a teenager,
if you're not risk averse.
If you're not risk averse, yes. But I mean, it was a very unusual teenager who wasn't sneaking some alcohol out of their parents' drinks cabinet. You know, it was a very unusual teenager who wasn't going out and trying to kiss a girl. Like, you know, a massive drop in the number of people who've even been on a date. I actually saw something the other day that I forgot to pull up for this, where it's something like 40% of Japanese, young Japanese men under 25 have never even been on a date. I've never, like, even, like, almost half the country has had no interaction with the opposite sex. That's insane. It's just madness, isn't it? It's like, how can a civilization continue itself when you have a generation like that?
Because you're socialised by your friends and by your parents. So the less time you spend with them, the less time you're being socialised into your society, into your culture, into your community. And what's socialising us now is the phone, and what's on the phone. Most of it is lies and rubbish. There's perverts on there, there's lunatics on there, and it's basically full of lies and people portraying something that they're not. Hence, we're not socialising young people the right way. We're socialising them into a way that doesn't exist in reality. Hence why they're depressed.
And there's also the phenomenon of sort of self-funneling your own, sort of curating your own choices into a funnel that only shows you 2 or 3 different subjects at any one time. So you become very immersed in 1 or 2 particular things at the expense of learning anything about the myriad of other subjects that exist. And so you become kind of fixated in a monomaniacal way about a particular issue, a particular topic, which is really weird because in the real world, you would just be exposed to lots of different competing subjects for your attention. And so, again, it makes you sort of isolated and siloed and unaware of what the rest of the world around you is even like. And if everyone's doing this on their phones, I mean, like, you know, how can you know anything about the people around you if they've got this weird expertise in like 1 or 2 really specific and niche subjects and know nothing about the rest of the world around them? How can you even start a conversation with that person? You know, because they can only talk about one thing, and if you're not already in that silo, you don't know anything about this thing, and you've got no interest in it. You wouldn't know where to start. So this is not good. And when asked, young people do say, well, it is social... Well, sorry, actually, before we go on to this next one, there's a bit more on this. So one popular explanation, they say, is the decline of social media, of socialization is the rise of technology. And I think that's probably true, and this shows in their habits. Essentially, 100% of 18 to 24-year-olds are on social media. 54% think they spend too much time on their cell phone. 72% of teens say their phone is sometimes the first thing they look at when they wake up. And Jean Tweng again argues that these screen-using activities are linked to indicators of depression and unhappiness. For example, she finds that kids using devices more than 3 hours a day are 30% more likely to have an indicator of suicidality. She also links increased screen time to declining sleep. I don't even think that's controversial.
Every day. They're better looking than me, they're better looking than me, they've got a better life than me, they've got a nicer bum than me, they've got a better friends than me, their food looks better than mine.
They've got more likes than I do. And
It's constant.
It becomes the gamification of their entire life as well. There's competition for likes and retweets and all this sort of
Someone
stuff.
told me, explained this to me, I thought it was really good. They said young people now are trying to be the star in their own life movie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I thought that really explains it. They're just acting a different version of themselves to be the star on their own phone to everybody else.
And it's very competitive. It's very competitive. You know, I use social media. I know exactly what it's like to want to get more likes than someone else that you know, there's no direct competition, but you find yourself falling into this sort
We
of...
are competitive creatures.
Exactly. And the whole thing is essentially a game that we're all playing all the time. And so, I mean, you know, it's one thing for me, you know, a 42-year-old man to be like, well, at least I can recognize that and separate myself from it. But if you're 15, how do you do that? You know, I'm so glad it didn't exist when I was 15. Like, good God. But anyway, when asked, young people will say, yeah, it is social media that's to blame. I mean, this is a remarkable article from The Guardian in 2018. Again, before the COVID lockdowns, social media has poisoned us, says one young person. That's just such a brilliant way of framing it as well. Poison. It is a poison. You know, it seeps into every aspect of your life and it makes you sick. There's no getting away from it other than simply putting the damn phone down.
If you're seeing posts that are saying, are you unhappy? Do you not like your body? Have you tried cutting?
Oh, God.
And then it's like, well, look at this post. Like 84,000 people have liked it. And It's that again. It's we're not protecting our children from the bad men and the bad people of the world.
It's not even necessarily that as well that they're bad people on the other end of it. It's that they are people who don't know what they're going to effect.
They're also damaged.
Yeah, exactly. So, this person, like you say, gets 84,000 likes or something. But when they posted it, they didn't know that was going to happen. And so they were just, expressing frustration or something like this. And then suddenly that, got a lot of attention. And so now that looks like the cool thing to do. Like there are, forums that have like, for things that are really quite harmful, like anorexia, sort of fetishization forums almost, where there's lots of people who encourage each other on down this road. And you think it's the last place you want a young person to get trapped, because if you think you're going to get an unhealthy view of your body on Instagram, well, you can easily find yourself in these places, and there's nothing stopping anyone from just falling into them. So all you need is an internet browser. Yeah, so easy to get. But yeah, so this was a chap called Joe, who's 24, who says. And the Guardian want to frame this as well. Young people have got problems with student debt, and their mental health, their lack of housing, their loneliness. It's like, yeah, but okay, student debt maybe is a concern, but I don't think it's what's causing this tremendous loneliness and mental health crisis. And it's certainly not responsible for the lack of housing. What it is, according to Joe, is it's the whole generation has essentially, the whole text generation has taken a lot of character out of young people's communication and left them, a lot of them, strangers to themselves. The influence of social media has poisoned the generations that have only known that life as well, which I think is remarkable, from, again, a 24-year-old man. So this is someone who's undoubtedly been on social media for as long as they can really remember. Their entire life has been subsumed in this. And this is terrible. And I think the problems with mental health and loneliness particularly is a product of that, as we discussed. I think that's, these things are all the consequence of it. And so, I hate to say it, but I just don't think the young people should have social media.
They shouldn't, but then we also need to look at parents and government as well. Yeah. So what I've seen in young people is they hardly ever now grow up. There's not that moment where they're now a young adult. Yeah. They're 23, they're still a child. Yeah. They're still living with mummy and daddy. They still don't make their own decisions. They're scared of the world. They're scared of everything because in their mid-teens, the parents carried on that nurturing when there should have been a break and said, you need to stand on your own 2 feet now. Still live here for the next couple of years, but eventually you need to get out and you need to make your own way in the world. That doesn't happen anymore. And then with the government is doing this all the time. It's for the whole population. We're pampering the whole population all the time. It's not your fault. What can we give you? What can the state do to make you happy? What can the state give you? Yeah. And it's like, your state can't do anything for you. You need to do it for yourself. And we've just basically castrated the whole generation of young people that they can't do anything themselves anymore. That's a bit of a generalisation, but
but I totally take it, and I don't think it's an inaccurate generalisation. There are going to be people who don't fall into that category, obviously, and lucky them, frankly. And those people probably have fathers saying, "No, get up and do it yourself," because for a lot of people who don't have that, you're exactly right. All of the incentives are towards harm reduction, and I'm sorry, but sometimes you've got to scrape your knee. Sometimes you've got to have a failure. Sometimes you've got to have that slap in the face that tells you, "Look, you've got to be aware of your surroundings and take responsibility for the things you've done." And like you're saying, everything is incentivizing them to not take that responsibility now. It's like, sorry, that means you're going to have this extended adolescence in which you never mature into being an adult.
Yes.
And that's the problem. And that's you're miserable because you've got no purpose in life, because you've taken on no responsibilities and you have no friends, no family, you're on your own and you've got nowhere to go. No wonder you're depressed.
And if you don't turn into an adult, that means you'll always be a drain on someone else. Yeah. Because that's what children are.
Yeah. Well, I hate framing it that way. They are an obligation, but it's
a drain you want to give to your children, but they're a drain to your resources. But when you're an adult child, you're still a drain on society, on someone else. If you're not making your own way in the world, someone else is having to make your way for you. Yeah. And it's a drain.
And you've got an obligation there you're not filling up to fulfilling, and you should. But anyway, so that's why I think young people are terribly depressed, and I don't think it's going to get any better while you're still stuck on social media. You might find that a little bit ironic, considering how we rely on social media so much for broadcasting, but if you're a young person, it's the only thing that's really good for you, I think.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast to the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as the Epoch series, this episode on the greatest knight of his age, William Marshall. Now, if you want to follow us and see what else we're putting out, we can follow us on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.